The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of reinforced titanium and crystalline viewing ports, orbiting the neutral moon of Xandros Prime like a massive wheel in the darkness of space. 47 species had gathered for an emergency session, their representatives filling the circular chamber with a cacophony of languages, scents, and electromagnetic signals that the translation system struggled to process in real time. Varix stood at the central podium, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he addressed the assembled delegates. The Zentari diplomat's crimson skin darkened with stress as he presented the crisis that threatened every civilization in the known galaxy. The Crithian swarm has consumed 3 star systems in 6 standard months, Varix announced, his voice carrying the weight of billions of lost lives. They do not negotiate, they do not retreat. They simply consume everything organic and convert it into more bioships for their fleet. Holographic displays activated throughout the chamber, showing footage that made even the most hardened military representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. Planets stripped of all life, populations converted into biomass, entire ecosystems reduced to protein slurry. To fuel the swarm's expansion, the insectoid Threxians clicked their mandibles in distress, while the aquatic Aquilian released clouds of alarmed pheromones into their containment tanks. Even the silicon-based Korvax, who had no biological vulnerabilities to the swarm, understood the existential threat facing carbon-based life. Projections indicate the swarm will reach Council core systems within 2 standard years, Varix continued, his secondary arms pulling up tactical maps. We must act now with overwhelming force, or we will all share the fate of the Helios colonies. The vote was unanimous. A coalition fleet would be assembled, the largest military force the Galactic Council had ever authorized. One by one, species pledged their contributions to the war effort, the Zentari, proud warriors who had defended the galaxy for 10,000 years, committed 200 warships, including their legendary Dreadnought-class vessels equipped with particle beam arrays capable of cracking moons. The Aquilian followed with 150 ships, their bioorganic cruisers that could regenerate damage and adapt to enemy tactics in real time. Korvax pledged 80 vessels, each one bristling with plasma weaponry that could turn asteroids into vapor-lesser species, added their forces. The Threxians offered 40 scout ships with stealth capabilities. The Vornith contributed 30 heavy carriers. And even the peaceful Lioness reluctantly authorized 20 medical frigates to support the campaign. Then came humanity's turn. Ambassador Daniel Harper rose from the human delegation seat, a modest section in the outer ring of the chamber reserved for newer council members. At 53 years old, with graying hair and calm brown eyes, he looked unremarkable compared to the exotic aliens surrounding him. The chamber fell silent as Daniel walked to the human podium, curiosity replacing the urgent discussions. Humanity had joined the council only 15 years ago. Considered a minor species with limited territory, modest technology, and a single star system to their name, Daniel reached the podium and activated the human display. Earth appeared in holographic form, rotating slowly above the projector. A blue and green marble that seemed almost quaint compared to the vast empires represented in the chamber. The United Nations of Earth pledges its full support to the coalition. Daniel began, his voice steady and clear through the translation systems. Varix leaned forward from his seat, his forearms crossed in anticipation. Surely humanity would contribute at least a dozen ships, perhaps 20 if they stripped their home defense forces. We will send 1 ship, Daniel announced for 3 full seconds. The chamber remained silent as the translation systems ensured every species heard correctly. Then the laughter began. It started with the Threxians, their mandible clicking, transforming into their species equivalent of mocking laughter. The sound spread like wildfire through the chamber as species after species joined in the ridicule Varix's crimson skin flushed darker with contempt. He stood from his seat, his forearms spread wide in disbelief. One ship? Varix's voice boomed through the chamber. Ambassador Harper, this is not a patrol mission or a diplomatic escort. We face an extinction-level threat that has already consumed billions of lives, and humanity offers one ship. The laughter intensified. A Warrant delegate made a comment in their language about humanity sitting this conflict out if they couldn't make a meaningful contribution, which sparked another wave of amusement. Daniel stood quietly at the podium, his expression unchanged, waiting for the mockery to subside. A Korvax representative, their crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns, spoke through their quantum interface. Perhaps the humans misunderstand the scale of this threat. One ship cannot even serve effectively as a scout vessel when we face thousands of bioships. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Some species were already dismissing humanity from their calculations, treating Earth's contribution as essentially zero in their strategic planning. I understand perfectly, Daniel replied once the noise decreased enough for him to be heard. The United Nations is sending the Uns Valiant, our most advanced vessel. She will depart for the rendezvous point within one standard week. Varix couldn't contain his scorn. His forearms gestured dismissively as he addressed not just Daniel, but the entire chamber. This proves what many of us have suspected. Humanity is not ready for council membership, Varix declared. They lack the resources, the commitment, and apparently the courage to stand with us against true threats. Several species murmured agreement. Others were already moving on to discuss more substantial matters, dismissing humanity's contribution as irrelevant to the actual war planning. Daniel remained at the podium, his calm demeanor unshaken by the insults. We will be at Outpost Sigma as requested, he stated simply. Please transmit the full coordinates and rendezvous schedule to our delegation. He gathered his data tablet and turned to leave the podium. Behind him, the jeering continued, with species questioning whether Earth deserved its council seat or suggesting that humanity should focus on defending their single system rather than pretending to contribute to galactic affairs. As Daniel walked back toward the human delegation section, only one species remained silent throughout the mockery. Ambassador Kalira of the Lioness sat in her delegation's area, her golden fur catching the chamber's artificial lighting. Her large, thoughtful eyes followed Daniel's departure with curiosity rather than contempt. The Lioness had a reputation for careful study and patient observation, while other species dismissed humanity as unremarkable. Kalira's people had quietly researched Earth's history and found patterns that intrigued them. Species that had survived ice ages, global wars, and multiple near extinctions through nothing but ingenuity and stubborn refusal to surrender. A civilization that had gone from bronze tools to spaceflight in less than 6,000 years. An astonishingly rapid development by galactic standards. Scalera made a mental note to observe the human ship during the coming campaign. Something in Daniel's calm certainty suggested there was more to humanity's single ship contribution than appeared obvious 3 weeks later. The Coalition fleet assembled at Outpost Sigma, a massive military staging ground on the frontier of Swarm territory. Over 400 warships gathered information, representing the greatest concentration of military power the Council had deployed in living memory. Centauri dreadnoughts dominated the center formation, their kilometer-long hulls bristling with weapons, while Aquilian biocruisers formed elegant curves around the flanks. The UNS Valiant arrived last, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the designated coordinates. Compared to the massive vessels surrounding it, the human ship appeared almost modest. 300 meters long, with a sleek hull design that seemed to prioritize speed over raw firepower. The Valiant had an unusual configuration with what appeared to be railgun arrays along its spine and strange bulges amidships that didn't match any known weapon system. Admiral Crexus, the Zentari fleet commander aboard his flagship Crimson Blade, barely acknowledged the human vessel's arrival. His tactical officers added the Valiant to their fleet roster almost as an afterthought. Captain Brandon Cole stood on the Valiant's bridge, watching the assembled fleet through the main viewport. At 38 years old, he had commanded exploration vessels and patrol ships. But the Valiant was his first genuine warship, receiving fleet assignments from the Admiral's flagship, reported Lieutenant Amy Richardson from the tactical station. Brandon nodded. "Put it on screen." The orders appeared, and Brandon's jaw tightened slightly. The Valiant had been assigned to the rear support position, essentially removed from any direct combat role. "Placed with the supply convoys and medical ships, rear support," muttered Commander Jason Park from the operations console. "They're benching us before the game even starts." "We follow orders," Brandon replied calmly, though his crew could hear the edge in his voice. "Acknowledge receipt and take us to our assigned position." The Valiant moved through the massive fleet, passing between towering dreadnoughts and sleek cruisers, none of which even bothered hailing the small human vessel as they settled into position behind the main battle line. Amy turned from her console. The Coalition fleet cut through the darkness of space like a spear aimed at the heart of the swarm. 400 warships maintained perfect formation as they crossed into hostile territory. 3 days into the advance, long-range sensors detected the first signs of enemy activity in the Helios cluster, an asteroid field that had once been home to mining colonies before the swarm consumed everything living. Admiral Crexus studied the tactical display aboard his flagship, his forearms working multiple control interfaces simultaneously. The swarm's bioships were gathering in the asteroid field, using the rocks as cover while they prepared their ambush. All vessels, battle stations, Crexus transmitted across the fleet command channel. "Execute attack pattern Zentari 7 and advance on my mark." The massive Coalition fleet shifted into combat formation. Zentari dreadnoughts moved to the front with their heavy particle beam arrays charging, while Aquilian cruisers spread across the flanks to provide covering fire, and the Corvax vessels positioned themselves in the second wave with plasma batteries, ready in the rear position. Captain Brandon Cole watched the formation change through the Valiant's sensors. Swarm bioships emerging from the asteroid field. Amy Richardson reported from tactical, her fingers dancing across her console. "Count is 300 and rising. No, correction. 500 contacts and still increasing." The bioships were nightmares made real. Vessels constructed from converted organic matter that pulsed with sickly bioluminescence. Their hulls were covered in what looked like exposed muscle tissue and bone plates, with weapon ports that oozed acidic compounds and neural disruptors. "All ships, engage!" Crexus roared. The battle erupted in spectacular violence. Particle beams lanced through the void, striking bioships and burning through their organic armor, while the swarm responded with volleys of acidic projectiles that ate through energy shields and metal hulls with equal efficiency. An Aquilian cruiser took a direct hit, its bioorganic hull screaming as acid burned through 3 decks, before damage control teams could neutralize the compounds. The ship returned fire with its adaptive weapons, learning the bioship's defensive patterns and adjusting its targeting in real time. Corvax vessels unleashed their plasma batteries, superheated gas turning clusters of bioships into expanding clouds of vaporized biomass that glowed briefly before cooling in the vacuum. But for every bioship destroyed, 2 more seemed to emerge from the asteroid field. The swarm had anticipated the Coalition's attack and prepared a force larger than intelligence. Estimates had predicted. "Their numbers are greater than projected," Crexus muttered, watching his tactical display fill with hostile contacts. All vessels maintain formation and concentrate fire on their command nodes. The battle intensified. A Threxian scout ship exploded as neural disruptors overloaded its crew's nervous systems, killing everyone aboard in seconds. While a Vornith carrier launched wave after wave of fighter craft that swarmed around. Bioships like angry insects aboard the Valiant. The crew watched the carnage unfold through their sensors. "Captain, multiple Coalition vessels are taking heavy damage," Amy reported, highlighting 3 ships on the tactical display. "That Zentari cruiser just lost main power, and a Korvax vessel has hull breaches across 4 sections." Brandon studied the battle, his tactical mind processing the chaos into patterns. The swarm ships were targeting specific systems with disturbing precision, as if they knew exactly where to strike each species' vessels for maximum damage. "They're learning," he said quietly, watching how each ship defends itself and adapting their attacks. Commander Jason Park looked up from his console. "Sir, we can help those damaged vessels. The Valiant has point defense systems that could provide cover while they retreat." "We have our orders," Brandon replied, though his voice was tight with frustration. "Rear support means we stay in position unless commanded otherwise." The battle raged for another 20 minutes. The Coalition fleet's superior technology and firepower began to turn the tide, destroying bioships faster than they could be replaced. But casualties were mounting. Then the tactical situation changed. Dramatically, a wing of 30 bioships broke through the Coalition's defensive line, exploiting a gap created when a Zentari dreadnought had to pull back for emergency repairs. The bioships ignored the warships and made directly for the supply convoy in the rear. "Admiral, swarm forces are targeting the logistics vessels." A Zentari officer, Reperted Crexus, cursed in his native language. Without the supply ships, the fleet couldn't sustain extended operations in hostile territory. "Redirect 3rd Squadron to intercept," he ordered. "Sir, 3rd Squadron is engaged with their own targets. They can't break off without creating another gap in our lines." Brandon saw the swarm wing on his tactical display, accelerating toward the vulnerable supply ships with clear intent. This was not an opportunity. This was a necessity. "All hands battle stations," Brandon commanded, his voice cutting through the bridge. "Helm, get us between those bioships and the convoy maximum speed." "Captain, we'll be breaking formation," Jason warned. "I'm aware," Brandon replied. "Do it now." The Valiant's engines flared with blue-white intensity as the ship accelerated forward with startling velocity. Coalition sensors officers monitoring the rear area did double takes as the human vessel suddenly shot past them at speeds that defied expectations for a ship its size. "Time to intercept?" Brandon asked. 40 seconds to weapons range," Amy responded, her hands already preparing targeting solutions. "Captain, recommend we use the kinetic kill vehicles." "Agreed on all KKV tubes and prepare for rapid fire." The swarm wing detected the Valiant's approach, and several bioships peeled off to engage the interceptor. They fired volleys of acidic projectiles and neural disruptor pulses. But the human ship's speed made it a difficult target. Evasive pattern, Delta 3. Brandon ordered the Valiant twisted and rolled through space, dodging the incoming fire with maneuvers that made the crew's restraints dig into their shoulders. 2 acid bursts passed within meters of the hull, close enough that point defense lasers had to vaporize the droplets before they could splash against the armor, entering weapons range in 5 seconds. Amy counted down. 4, 3, 2, 1 firing. The Valiant's kinetic kill vehicle tubes released their payload with electromagnetic acceleration. Tungsten rods, each one weighing 50 kilograms and accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, streaked toward the swarm wing. The bioships had never encountered weapons like this. Their organic armor was designed to absorb energy weapons and resist chemical attacks. But kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic speeds were something entirely different. The first rod struck a bioship amidships, and the kinetic energy release was equivalent to a small nuclear explosion. The vessel simply disintegrated, transformed from a functioning warship into an expanding debris field in less than a second. 5 more rods found targets. 5 more bioships exploded. The remaining swarm vessels attempted to evade, but the KKVs were too fast and too numerous. Within 90 seconds, the entire wing of 30 bioships had been reduced to wreckage drifting through space. The supply convoy was safe. Brandon allowed himself a slight smile. "Oh, return us to our assigned position." "Aye, Captain," as the Valiant turned back toward the rear area. Every sensor in the Coalition fleet that had witnessed the engagement was focused on the small human ship aboard the Crimson Blade. Admiral Crexus stared at his tactical display in stunned silence. His sensor officers had recorded the entire engagement, and the data they were showing him seemed impossible. "Confirm those readings," he ordered. "Confirmed." "Admiral," his chief tactical officer replied. The human vessel destroyed 30 swarm bioships in under 2 minutes. Using purely kinetic weapons, we've never seen that kind of efficiency against the swarm. Crexus's comm system chimed. Captain Cole's face appeared on his screen. "Admiral Crexus." "This is Captain Cole of the Ons Valiant," Brandon said formally. "I apologize for breaking formation without authorization. I observed hostile forces threatening the supply convoy and took action to neutralize them." Crexus studied the human captain. This was not the behavior of someone seeking glory or trying to showboat. This was the action of a professional warrior who saw a threat and eliminated it. "Captain Cole, your breach of formation is noted," Crexus replied, his tone carefully neutral. "However, your intervention saved valuable logistics assets. Well done." "Thank you, Admiral," Brandon acknowledged. "Valiant is returning to assigned position." The comlink closed, but Crexus continued staring at the tactical data. Humanity's ship had demonstrated capabilities that challenged every assumption the Council had made about Earth's military technology. He accessed the fleet's strategic database and pulled up humanity's file. Minimal territory, limited resources, recent addition to the Council. Generally dismissed as a minor species, perhaps that assessment needed revision. This main battle concluded an hour later with the swarm forces destroyed or driven off. The Coalition had won, but at significant cost. 12 ships destroyed, 43 damaged, and over 8,000 casualties across multiple species as the fleet regrouped and began damage assessments. Word spread about the human ship's intervention. Crews who had been mocking Earth's single-ship contribution were now reviewing sensor recordings of intelligence reports confirmed what the Coalition feared most. The swarm's primary hive nexus was located in the Corva system, a binary star system that had once supported 6 inhabited planets before the parasitic species. Arrived now, Corva was a nightmare made manifest, with the hive nexus on Corva Prime coordinating the swarm's expansion across 3 sectors. Destroying it would cripple the enemy's ability to organize and potentially end their threat forever. Admiral Crexus called a strategic planning session aboard the Crimson Blade, inviting commanders from each major species to coordinate the final assault. Captain Brandon Cole received an invitation to attend, a significant change from being dismissed as irrelevant. He arrived at the flagship's conference room to find it filled with alien officers representing the galaxy's most powerful militaries. "Captain Cole." Crexus greeted him with a nod that conveyed genuine respect. "Your presence is welcome. Please join us." The holographic display at the center of the conference table showed the Corva system in detail. Sensors had counted over 3,000 bioships patrolling the planets, with the hive nexus itself appearing as a massive organic structure rising from Corva Prime's equator. "The swarm's defenses are formidable," Crexus explained. his forearms highlighting different tactical elements. Any direct assault on the planet will face overwhelming resistance. A Korvax commander, their crystalline body pulsing with concern, projected their analysis. Our projections indicate we would lose at least 100 ships attempting to reach the planet's surface. And even then, orbital bombardment may not penetrate the Hive Nexus's defensive layers. An Aquilian admiral released distressed pheromones into her tank. We cannot accept those casualties. The fleet would be crippled, even if we succeed. Brandon studied the tactical display, noting patterns in the bioship movements. May I ask a question? All eyes turned to the human captain. Of course, Crexus replied. How is the swarm coordinating so many vessels across such a large area? Brandon asked. The bioships respond to threats with precise timing, suggesting real-time communication. How are they achieving that? The Korvax commander's crystalline structure brightened with interest. An excellent observation. Captain Cole, our analysis indicates the Hive Nexus uses quantum entanglement for instantaneous communication with all swarm vessels, allowing coordinated action across vast distances. Quantum entanglement, Brandon repeated, processing the implications. So if we could disrupt that communication network, even temporarily, the bioships would lose coordination. Crexus leaned forward. In theory, yes. But we have no technology capable of interfering with quantum entanglement on that scale. Brandon met the Admiral's gaze. Humanity does. The conference room fell silent. Every commander focused on the human captain with renewed intensity. Explain. Crexus commanded. The Valiant carries an experimental quantum disruptor. Brandon revealed. It was designed for electronic warfare against quantum communication networks. We've never tested it in actual combat, but our scientists believe it could create interference across an entire star system. Why didn't you mention this before? Demanded a Threxian commander. You didn't ask, Brandon replied simply. Until I saw the scale of the swarm's coordination, I didn't realize how relevant it would be. Crexus's forearms moved in complex patterns as he considered the tactical possibilities. How close would your ship need to be to the Hive Nexus to deploy this weapon? 10,000 kilometers, Brandon answered. And the disruption would last approximately 90 seconds, long enough for the Coalition fleet to exploit the confusion, but not long enough to permanently damage the swarm's communication network. 10,000 kilometers puts you well within the planet's defensive perimeter, an Aquilian officer observed. The bioships would converge on your position. The Valiant would face overwhelming force. I'm aware of the risks. Brandon acknowledged Crexus studied the human captain with his complex alien eyes, seeing something in Brandon's calm demeanor that reminded him of the greatest warriors in Zentari history. A complete understanding of the danger, coupled with absolute commitment to the mission. Captain Cole, are you volunteering to take the Valiant into the heart of the swarm's defenses alone? Crexus asked directly. Yes, Admiral, Brandon confirmed. One ship will attract less attention than a full strike force. And if we succeed in disrupting their communications, it will create the opening you need. The conference room erupted in debate. Some commanders argued it was suicide. Others questioned whether humanity's experimental technology would even work, while several pointed out that losing the Valiant would leave humanity with zero military contribution to the campaign. Crexus raised one arm for silence. Captain Cole, I will not order you to undertake this mission. The risks are too extreme, but if you genuinely volunteer, I will authorize it. The crew of the Valiant volunteers, Brandon stated firmly. Very well, Crexus decided. We will proceed as follows. The main fleet engages the swarm forces in a frontal assault, drawing as many bioships as possible away from the plan. Meanwhile, the Valiant will approach Corva Prime from a different vector and deploy the quantum disruptor once their communications fail. We press our advantage and eliminate the Hive Nexus. The plan was set. The Coalition fleet would stake everything on humanity's experimental technology and one captain's willingness to fly into certain death. 2 days later, the Coalition fleet arrived at the edge of the Corver system sensors, immediately lit up with hostile contacts. Bioships swarmed around every planet like insects defending a hive. Their grotesque organic HULLs pulsing with bioluminescence that created an eerie glow across the system. The Hive Nexus itself was visible even from extreme range. A massive structure on Corver Prime that had grown to dwarf mountains. Its bioorganic towers reaching into the planet's upper atmosphere. All vessels, prepare for engagement. Crexus transmitted across the fleet. Remember, we need to draw them away from the planet, make them commit everything to stopping us. The Valiant separated from the main fleet, accelerating on a trajectory that would bring it to Corver Prime from the opposite side of the system on the bridge. Brandon addressed his crew over the ship's intercom. All hands. This is the captain. You all know the mission, and you all know the risks. What we're about to attempt has never been done before. And the odds are heavily against us, but I believe in this crew and I believe in our ship. Let's show the galaxy what humanity can do. Lieutenant Amy Richardson checked her tactical systems one final time. All weapons ready. Captain Point Defense Grid online. KKV tubes loaded. Commander Jason Park monitored the power distribution. Quantum disruptor charging. We'll be ready to deploy on your command. Chief Engineer Melissa Grant reported from engineering. All systems optimal. Captain, the Valiant is ready. Then let's begin, Brandon ordered. Helm, take us in. The main battle erupted as the Coalition fleet engaged the swarm. Hundreds of ships clashed in a spectacular display of firepower that lit up the Corvus system like a second Symbio ships launched acidic volleys while Coalition vessels responded with particle beams, plasma batteries, and missile barrages. The scale of combat was beyond anything most crews had experienced. Meanwhile, the Valiant approached Corver Prime from the system's southern pole, using the planet's magnetic field to mask its sensor signature, entering the outer defensive perimeter, Amy reported. Detecting bioship patrols ahead, evasive pattern, and prepare point defense. Brandon commanded the Valiant twisted through space as bioships detected its approach. Acidic projectiles streaked toward the human vessel, but the point defense systems came alive. Kinetic Gatling arrays firing thousands of rounds per second to create a protective barrier of tungsten. Shrapnel bioships that pressed too close were shredded by the defensive fire. They're adapting, Amy warned, changing their approach vectors. Keep them off us, Brandon replied, watching the distance to the planet decrease. We need to reach deployment range. More bioships converged on the Valiant's position. The lone human vessel became the focus of dozens of enemy ships that recognized it as a threat. The Valiant's weapons fired continuously. KKV rounds tore through bioships at close range, while point defense systems created a lethal sphere around the vessel. But for every enemy destroyed, more appeared. Hull integrity at 85%. Jason reported as an acid burst splashed across the port quarter. Shields holding. Distance to deployment range? Brandon asked. 30,000 kilometers in closing, Amy answered. 25,000, 20,000. The bioships pressed their attack with suicidal intensity. They surrounded the Valiant, firing from every angle, while the human ship fought desperately to maintain its course. Shields at 60%. Jason called out, "Hull breaches on Deck 4. Seal it and keep us moving." Brandon ordered 15,000 kilometers. The Hive Nexus was now visible on the main viewport, a horrifying organic mountain that pulsed with sickly light. The bioships formed a final defensive wall directly in the Valiant's path. Dozens of vessels clustered together, creating a barrier of organic armor and weapons. All weapons. Fire everything, Brandon commanded the Valiant, unleashed its full arsenal. KKV rounds, missiles, and experimental plasma charges streaked forward, overwhelming the defensive wall through sheer firepower. BO ships exploded in brilliant flashes. The quantum disruption wave swept across the Corva system at the speed of light. Invisible but devastating to the swarm's entangled communication network. BO ships that had been executing precise tactical maneuvers suddenly lost all coordination. Vessels that had been working in perfect synchronization became thousands of individual ships acting on base instincts alone. A swarm attack formation that had been overwhelming a Centauri cruiser simply fell apart. The bioships drifting in different directions as their shared consciousness fractured into confusion. Admiral, the swarm forces have lost coordination. A Centauri sensor officer reported with barely contained excitement. They're no longer responding as a unified force. Crexus didn't hesitate. All vessels, press the attack, target their command nodes, and destroy everything that moves. The coalition fleet surged forward with renewed aggression. Centauri dreadnoughts unleashed devastating particle beam barrages that carved through clusters of confused bioships, while Aquilian cruisers adapted their weapons to exploit the enemies. Suddenly chaotic defensive patterns. Korvax plasma batteries turned entire formations into expanding clouds of superheated gas. The tide of battle shifted dramatically as the coalition's superior firepower overwhelmed the disorganized swarm. But aboard the Valiant, the situation had become critical. Captain, power levels dropping across all systems. Commander Jason Park reported, his voice tight with stress. The quantum disruptor is drawing more energy than projected. We're experiencing cascade failures in secondary systems. Warning alarms blared throughout the ship. Damage control teams rushed to contain electrical fires and seal ruptures in the power conduits. How long can we maintain the disruption? Brandon asked, gripping his command chair as the ship shuddered. 90 seconds as designed, Jason answered. But Captain, we won't have enough power to restart the main engines after shutdown. We'll be dead in space. Chief Engineer Melissa Grant's voice came through the intercom from engineering. Captain, I'm reading catastrophic overloads in the primary reactor. We're venting plasma from 3 cooling systems, and I can't stop it. Brandon absorbed this information with outward calm, though every member of his bridge crew understood what it meant. The Valiant had succeeded in deploying the weapon, but the ship would not survive the attempt. Maintain the disruption for the full 90 seconds, Brandon ordered. That's what we came here to do, but the danger was far from over on Corva Prime's surface. The Hive Nexus detected the quantum interference and identified its source. Though disrupted, the Nexus retained localized control over its planetary defenses. Massive biological cannons embedded in the planet's crust rotated toward the Valiant's position. These were weapons designed to defend against orbital bombardment, capable of launching projectiles into high orbit with terrifying accuracy. Captain, detecting weapons lock from the surface. Amy Richardson called out, multiple launches, estimate 20 projectiles incoming. Evasive maneuvers. Brandon commanded, Sir, main engines are offline. The helmsman replied, panic creeping into his voice. Maneuvering thrusters only. The Valiant tried to dodge, using its smaller positioning thrusters to alter course. But without main engines, the ship could only drift. It was like trying to dodge bullets while swimming through molasses. The first projectile missed by 300 meters. The second impacted the starboard quarter. A massive organic mass that hit with the force of a tactical nuclear weapon. The explosion tore through 4 decks, killing 6 crew members instantly and venting atmosphere into space. Hull plating peeled away like skin from a wound, exposing internal compartments to vacuum. Hull integrity at 40%. Jason reported, fighting to keep the power system stable. Structural failure in sections 9 through 12. Seal all bulkheads and evacuate damaged sections. Brandon ordered. "Amy, what's our weapon status?" "Offline, Captain," she replied, frustration evident in her voice. "We used everything we had getting through that defensive wall. There's nothing left to shoot." More projectiles streaked up from the planet. The Valiant's point defense systems, operating on emergency power, managed to intercept 3. But a 4th struck the port side, the impact sending the ship into an uncontrolled spin. The bridge crew was thrown against their restraints. Displays shattered and sparks flew from overloaded consoles. Brandon's head struck the armrest of his command chair, blood trickling down his temple, but he stayed conscious through sheer willpower. Damage report. He called out, "Life support failing on multiple decks." Jason gasped, pulling himself back to his station. "We've lost 30% of the crew. Medical is overwhelmed, Captain. We're dying here." The quantum disruptor completed its 90-second cycle and shut down. Across the system, the swarm's communications began to slowly re-establish. Though the damage to their coordination would take hours to fully repair, Brandon wiped blood from his eyes and looked at his tactical display. The Coalition fleet was winning, destroying swarm bioships by the hundreds. But the Hive Nexus on Corva Prime remained intact. As long as that structure existed, the swarm could rebuild, could adapt, could return to threaten the galaxy again. "Captain," Melissa's voice came through the intercom, weaker now. "Engineering here. We've got maybe 10 minutes before the reactor goes. Critical. You should order evacuation to the escape pods." Brandon looked around his bridge. He saw Lieutenant Amy Richardson with burns across her left arm, still trying to restore weapon systems. Commander Jason Park with blood streaming from a cut above his eye, routing power from life support to keep critical systems online. And the rest of his crew, battered and wounded, but still fighting. "Negative," Brandon replied, his voice carrying across the ship's intercom so every surviving crew member could hear. "We're not leaving, not yet, sir?" Melissa's confusion was evident. Brandon pulled up the navigation display, calculating trajectories and orbital mechanics in his head. The Valiant was badly damaged, but still had mass, still had momentum, and still had a fully armed self-destruct system. "All hands." "This is the captain," Brandon announced, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "I want you to know that serving with you has been the greatest honor of my life. What we've done here today will be remembered. Humanity will be remembered." Amy turned from her console, realization dawning in her eyes. "Captain, you're not. Plot a collision course with the Hive Nexus," Brandon ordered. "Divert all remaining power to maneuvering thrusters and prepare to arm the self-destruct sequence." Jason stared at his captain. "Sir, there has to be another way." "There isn't," Brandon replied quietly. "The quantum disruptor bought the fleet time. But that Hive Nexus will rebuild. We have one chance to end this. Right here, right now." Amy's hands moved to her console, then stopped. "Captain, I need you to confirm this order." Brandon met her eyes. "Lieutenant Richardson, plot the collision course. That's a direct order." She held his gaze for 3 seconds, then nodded. "Aye, sir, plotting course." Throughout the ship, crew members realized what was happening. There were no protests, no objections, no pleas for alternatives. They were volunteers who had joined Earth's military knowing they might be called upon to make the ultimate sacrifice. They had trained for this possibility, had accepted it as part of their duty in engineering. Melissa Grant secured the reactor's containment systems one last time, ensuring the ship would hold together long enough to reach the surface. "Engineering confirms ready. Captain, all power to maneuvering thrusters." The Valiant's positioning jets fired in coordinated bursts, slowly altering the crippled ship's trajectory toward Corva Prime aboard a Lioness medical frigate. Ambassador Kalira watched her sensors with dawning horror. She realized what the human ship was attempting. "No," she whispered in her native language. "Don't do this. There must be another way." She opened a communication channel to the Valiant, but received only static. The human ship's communications array had been destroyed in the attack, Admiral. Crexus also observed the Valiant's new trajectory. The Xanthari warrior felt something he rarely experienced. Helplessness had sent brave warriors to their deaths many times in his long military career, but always with a chance of survival, always with hope. This was different. The humans were choosing certain death to complete their mission. Honor to the Valiant, Crexus said softly. His forearms crossed in the Xanthari gesture of ultimate respect. The Valiant entered Cobra Prime's atmosphere, its hull beginning to glow from friction heat. The ship was never designed for atmospheric entry, especially not at orbital velocity. Metal screamed and buckled. Entire sections broke away, trailing fire and debris, but the ship's core structure held together. Brandon watched the Hive Nexus grow larger on his damaged view screen. The grotesque organic structure rose from the planet's surface like a cancer, pulsing with the life force of billions it had consumed. Distance to target? He asked. 400 kilometers, Amy reported, her voice remarkably steady. 300, 200. Arm to self-destruct. Brandon ordered. Jason's hands moved across his console. Self-destruct armed, awaiting final authorization code. Brandon entered his command codes. Authorization Col Alpha 77 Omega. The computer acknowledged. Self-destruct sequence authorized. Detonation in 60 seconds. The bridge crew sat at their stations, watching the countdown. They could have run, could have rushed to escape pods. That 3 months had passed since the Battle of Corva, and the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so silent. 37 species sat in their designated areas. Representatives who had once filled this space with debate and political maneuvering now focused entirely on the human podium, with expressions that ranged from profound respect to barely controlled grief. Ambassador Daniel Harper stood at that podium once again, but the chamber's atmosphere could not have been more different from his last appearance. Where there had been laughter and mockery before, now there was only solemn reverence. The swarm had been eradicated completely. Coalition forces had spent the last 3 months systematically destroying every bioship, every organic structure, every trace of the parasitic species that had threatened galactic civilization. The cost had been significant. 12 ships destroyed, 43 damaged, 8,000 casualties across multiple species, and 43 humans aboard the UN's Valiant who had given everything to secure victory. This council is called to order, Varix announced, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance. The Xanthari diplomat's forearms were positioned in a gesture of respect that his species reserved for fallen warriors. We gather to honor those who sacrificed themselves in defense of the galaxy. Daniel stood quietly, waiting. He had been through countless memorial services over the past months, had written letters to 43 families explaining how their loved ones had died as heroes, had attended funerals across Earth where entire communities mourned their losses. Now it was the galaxy's turn to pay respects. Varix stepped down from his podium and approached Daniel. The Xanthari, who had mocked humanity's single-ship contribution, now looked at the human ambassador with something approaching reverence. Ambassador Harper, Varix began. His voice transmitted throughout the chamber. I stand before you and before this council to offer my deepest apologies. When you announced that humanity would send one ship, I laughed. I called your contribution meaningless and questioned whether Earth deserved its council seat. The chamber remained absolutely silent as Varix continued. I was wrong, catastrophically, shamefully wrong. The Xanthari have waged war for 10,000 years. We pride ourselves on military excellence and tactical brilliance. Yet we never conceived of what your people accomplished. Varix's forearms spread wide in the ultimate gesture of Xanthari respect. The crew of the Valiant demonstrated courage beyond measure, innovation beyond our understanding, and sacrifice beyond what any warrior should be asked to give. they saved the galaxy with one ship. And I will carry the shame of my mockery for the rest of my life." Other representatives rose to speak. An Aquilian admiral, her tank pulsing with solemn bioluminescence, addressed the chamber. The Aquilian contributed 150 vessels to the Foy Tuida coalition. "We lost 3 ships and 400 crew members. Our losses were significant and our grief is deep." She paused, her tentacles rippling with emotion. "But the humans sent 1 ship and lost everyone aboard. Their sacrifice was total. Their commitment absolute. We calculate military contributions in terms of vessels and firepower. But humanity measured their commitment in something we had forgotten: the willingness to give everything for a cause greater than themselves." A Korvax commander. Their crystalline structure dimmed morning, projected their analysis. "Our tactical review indicates that humanity's quantum disruptor created the strategic opening that led to victory. And the Valiant's final action ensured the swarm could never rebuild 1 ship, accomplished what hundreds could not. This defies conventional military logic. Yet the evidence is undeniable." Ambassador Kalira of the Lioness finally stood, her golden fur catching the chamber's lighting as she approached Daniel. "The Lioness have studied humanity since your admission to the Council," Kalira said, her voice gentle but carrying to every corner of the chamber. "We observed that you evolved on what we classify as a death world, a planet where survival required constant adaptation, innovation, and resilience." She turned to address the full council. "We noted peculiarities in human psychology. Your species bonds intensely with those you consider family or crew. You demonstrate irrational courage in defense of others. And you possess a unique capacity for sacrifice that seems to defy evolutionary logic." Kalira looked back at Daniel. "What we failed to communicate to this council before the war was that these traits are not weaknesses or curiosities. They are humanity's greatest strength when faced with an existential threat. Humans do not calculate odds or measure acceptable losses. You simply do what must be done, regardless of cost." The Lioness ambassador's eyes shimmered with genuine emotion. Captain Brandon Cole and his crew did not sacrifice themselves because they were, or that they did it because they saw innocent lives threatened across the galaxy and could not turn away. That is humanity's gift to the galaxy, the moral courage to act when action seems impossible. Daniel listened to these words, his own emotions carefully controlled. He had known Brandon Cole personally, had recommended him for command of the Valiant, had assured the captain's family that their son would return home safely. That promise haunted Daniel every day when the chamber fell silent again. Daniel finally spoke. "On behalf of humanity, I thank this council for your words and your respect, but I want to be clear about something important." He paused, ensuring every species was paying attention. The crew of the Valiant did not sacrifice themselves for glory, for recognition, or to prove humanity's worth to the galaxy. They did it because billions of lives were at stake, and they had the ability to make a difference. Daniel's voice strengthened. Captain Cole told his crew before the final assault that serving together had been the greatest honor of his life. They faced death with courage, not because they were special or superhuman, but because they were doing their duty. He pulled up a holographic display showing 43 faces. Lieutenant Amy Richardson, tactical officer. She was 28 years old, loved classical music, and had just been accepted to Earth's Advanced Military Academy. Another face highlighted, Commander Jason Park, operations officer. He was 32, married with a daughter he would never see grow up. And he volunteered for the mission, knowing he might not return. One by one, Daniel shared details about each crew member. Not just their ranks and duties, but their lives, their dreams, their families. Chief Engineer Melissa Grant, 35 years old, had designed half the Valiant's experimental systems herself. Daniel continued. She stayed at her post in engineering during the final descent, ensuring the ship would hold together long enough to complete the mission. The chamber listened to every name, every story. Representatives who had dismissed humanity as a minor species now understood that each of those 43 lives represented an entire universe of experiences, relationships, and potential. When Daniel finished the last name, he made his request. Humanity does not seek special privileges or increased council authority. What we ask is that these 43 people be remembered, that their sacrifice be honored not with empty words, but with meaningful action. Varric stood immediately. The council unanimously proposes the construction of a memorial on Xandros Prime, listing every name and preserving their stories for all future generations. The vote was instantaneous and unanimous. Every species supported the memorial, but Daniel wasn't finished. There's more. The United Nations has authorized construction of a new vessel like her predecessor. She will be named Uns Valiant, and she will be crewed by volunteers who understand the legacy they carry forward. A holographic image appeared, showing the new ship's design, larger and more advanced than the original, incorporating lessons learned from the battle, but built on the same principles of innovation and courage. Admiral Crexus, attending the session via holographic link from his flagship, spoke for the first time. Ambassador Harper, the Coalition fleet respectfully requests that humanity consider sharing their kinetic weapons technology and quantum disruption systems, not as a demand, but as a request between allies who have fought together. Daniel met the Admiral's gaze. Humanity will share these technologies under one condition: they must be used only for defense, never for conquest or oppression. We will not be responsible for giving the galaxy new tools for warfare without ensuring they serve peace. The Council accepted these terms immediately. Several species began drafting formal alliance treaties with Earth, recognizing that humanity's value extended far beyond military contributions. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened across the galaxy. Humans who had been largely ignored or dismissed as representatives of a minor species found themselves welcomed with genuine respect. Human merchants received preferential trading terms. Human scientists were invited to collaborate on advanced research projects. Human diplomats were consulted on matters of galactic importance. The change was so dramatic that some humans found it uncomfortable. They had not sought recognition or special treatment, only the opportunity to prove themselves as equals. But the galaxy had learned an important lesson: that worth is not measured by the size of one's territory or the number of one's warships, but by the courage to stand and fight when standing seems impossible. 6 months after the battle, the memorial on Xandros Prime was completed. A massive structure of polished stone and